All right, we're ready to go.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Welcome to Northwest Indiana Green Drinks. And I'm always happy to share this year that this is our 10th year. And we'll be moving into our 11th year next year. And it seems like it's all gone by just with the blink of an eye. So I'm really excited by this. I want to say right away that December is our traditional month to take off for the holidays. So we will not be meeting in December. So don't be looking for us because we won't be here. Okay. So I'm very excited about today's program. But before I get into that, I want to acknowledge our sponsors. And our sponsors are Save the Dunes, Michigan City Sustainability Commission, plus 219 Green Connect provides us with all of our email system supports and our social media platforms. So I do want to recognize Kathy Sipple for that. And Kathy also gets an extra shout out because she helped us get started in Michigan City when we first started this journey. So Kathy, thank you so very much. And it's been great seeing you join us more often since we've been doing it virtually. Also, I want to mention who our hosts are this month. We have quite a few, and that's very exciting. We have the League of Women Voters, LaPorte County chapter. And I noticed also that the League of Women Voters Porter County chapter signed on as a host too. The Michigan City Human Rights Commission and WIMS AM Radio, which serves an area which spans from Chicago all the way to southwestern Michigan. So thank you very much to our sponsors and our hosts, because without you, we would not be able to do this. I'm going to hand this off to Katie Nix, and she's going to take care of housekeeping items. And the teacher in me is going to come out. Please listen to her very carefully. No, I'm just joking. Go ahead, Katie.
Thanks, Nancy. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Just a couple of things. This presentation is being recorded, and so the recording version is going to live on the Save the Dunes Facebook page as well as our YouTube channel. Encourage you, if you didn't catch it on the live version, you can watch it there, but also share it with your friends and family to spread this really great presentation widely. If you have questions during the presentation, we highly encourage you to drop those into the chat if you're joining us on Zoom, or into the comments if you're watching on Facebook Live. And at the end, with whatever time we have left, we will get to those. Everyone who's on Zoom is muted, but at the end, if there's time, I can give you the permission to unmute yourself, and then you can potentially ask questions then as well. I think that is everything. So I'll hand it back to you, Nancy.
Katie, thank you so very much. And we're getting so efficient at this that, Billy, you're going to start much sooner than you thought you were. So anyhow, I never spend a lot of time introducing our speaker because I know everybody's here to discover what our speaker has to say and also to learn from them. So if you're really curious about Billie's background and also her educational experience and what she does for a job, you can go back to the posting for this event and read all about her and what she's done. So I'm so happy and excited, and I do have to acknowledge Sarah Hafner, who came up with the idea, who contacted Billie, and along with the League of Women Voters, LaPorte County, our evening is happening because of her. So Sarah, shout out to you. Thank you so very much. Tonight's program is entitled Accidental Environmentalist, a Potawatomi Woman's Journey. And I just want to say a really brief personal thing about Billie, because I've heard her present at least a couple times now. And she is genuine and she is transparent. And those are two really rare qualities to find in human beings in our day and age. So I really want to acknowledge her for that. And that means that all of us are in for a very special Discovery Journal journey together this evening. So Billie, I'll hand it off to you.
Thank you, Nancy. That's so kind of you to say. I'm going to get us started. So can everyone see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. This, Nancy already announced that the title is Accidental Environmentalist, and I'm obviously the Potawatomi woman in this journey. This photo I just want to point out is from Jian Lee, who is just this fantastic woman that I've been working with for the last few years out of Chicago. And this came from an event called Whose a Land Is This, or her Chicago boardwalk. If any of you were there when they had the Potawatomi sign, that's Jian's sign, and I got to be a part of that event. This is me, and I used to just sort of introduce myself, and people didn't really know what I was saying, and it would translate sort of poorly, so I wrote it out for you. Baju, Wabji Indigenous, Mako and Dodem, Potawatomi and Dao, Mishawaka and Dodem, Chesterton and Da. So what I just said is all sort of written out there for you. That's a traditional Potawatomi greeting that will sort of all come into play as I share my story with you. And I do want to point out, if you want to get a hold of me and with the work that I discussed that I do, you can email me, and it might take me some time to get back to you. Sometimes it takes me a couple of days, but I will get back to you. I want to thank Nancy and Sarah and Northwest Indiana Green Drinks, the sponsors, and all the participants who are spending their Thursday night with me. Miigwech. I always start out every presentation recognizing my ancestors from my past, present, and future. This is my grandmother, Mary Elizabeth Topash Warren, and she was a full-blooded Native American who went to the Mount Pleasant boarding school, and I really honor her because without her surviving and passing down this generational knowledge to our family, I would not be able to do the work I do today. So my story really begins, out of finding my passion, my voice, and my niche in social and environmental justice. I do want to say that that does not come with an easy road, especially when the path wasn't really made for people teaching traditional ecological knowledge in this area. There's very few people doing it. So I had to first get frustrated. I had to find my voice, mentors, relationship building platforms, my niche. I made lots of mistakes. I just mentioned some of those to Kathy and Nancy today. Persistence, courage, growth, and even diversifying myself to do this work. This picture on the right-hand side is a youth environmental justice protest that I attended in Chicago pre-COVID. And that's just part of the work that I do every day towards social and environmental justice. Sen is a Potawatomi word for rock, and Mbish means water. I do conduct water ceremonies, although I never ask to be paid for it. Sometimes I do conduct those after I do a training session when I feel really close to a group, or I feel that it's necessary. And sometimes the softness of a spiritual sort of ceremony can soften the work that we do as environmentalists. And so I ask all of you today, when I do discuss things that you may not have heard before, that there's two ways of growing. We can be rigid like a rock, or we could flow like water. And I know most of you, and I think most of you I love and adore, and we flow like water being environmentalists. So where do you come from? And normally in a workshop or a training session, I would be very interactive and ask people where they come from. And I always think that learning happens both ways. And in a university setting, or even sometimes in a public school setting, we learn sort of where someone's at a podium or in front of the classroom. And I like to do all my training in sort of a circle, and I want to know the people that I'm working with and talking to. Like, what is your access to food, water, resources, language, culture, religion, spirituality, health, safety, stability? Why does it matter? This is sort of an old map, and why it matters to me is we live at the top of this map in the Great Lakes region, and it's a very sacred area to the Potawatomi people. This area is known for our wetlands. These wetlands sort of tie or tether me to this land, and not only are my ancestors buried here, but this area is a very sacred area to us. And as we go along, I'll share that story. I shared my name is Wabzi, which is white swan. For those living in the region, they've tried to erase a lot of our names. And so by that erasure, we don't know what a lot of Potawatomi words mean sometimes. And Wabash in our area means the white caps of the water. And that's a very popular street in Indiana and Chicago. And that Wab or Wa means white. So my story sort of begins here in Mishawaka, Indiana, or Mishawaka, which is sort of means that white ash that is burned after a controlled burn. And I think I might have seen Sandy on the call who actually does controlled burns. But I grew up as a child learning that Mishawaka meant Potawatomi princess. And it's sort of a really destructive way of thinking about our language and who I am as a person. So this is sort of me as a kid, and I grew up around a river, and growing up around water was pretty important to my story because I think I love nature because I was always playing in the woods, in the water with my sisters, my neighbors. And this is a picture of me in 1978 when I just started going to school. And why that's important is I was told when I went to school, don't speak the language, because it was illegal until 1978 to speak my language, practice my culture or spirituality. And as you can imagine, it sort of gave me a false sense of who I was as the public schools sort of framed what Indigenous people are in birth. So I had to grow really frustrated before I sort of gained my voice. I was being devalued as a Native American, and history books were taught that Natives almost don't exist anymore. And so not only did I grow up in a city that didn't honor the word Mishawaka and what it meant, and told this fairy tale story of a Potawatomi princess in which we don't have princesses, I was also discriminated against. Not only as a Native American person, but even in high school, I was told that I couldn't go out for the boys' soccer team. I did anyway, and my father went to practices with me to ensure that when they made the cuts, that they were fair. I ended up making the team and being the first female to play soccer. And I also witnessed that joining the military. I joined the Air Force after high school as a means to an end to educate myself. And I also suffered discrimination there as well. So all around me, I had social and environmental injustice happening, and I was very frustrated. And when I did speak up, I really didn't know how to speak up for myself in a way that didn't cause conflict. I knew that there was a lot of erasure just because of that law, that we couldn't speak our language or practice our culture or spirituality openly, that was happening. And then names were changing. We were rerouting waters, renaming things. And our waterways, it's interesting to note, are all sort of action oriented or descriptive. And our language is very descriptive and respectful of land. And so when we start naming cities and putting up statues with male names, it sort of really made me question who I was, my gender, my culture, if it was okay to even be me. And so there's also what's called cultural genocide. Cultural genocide is where they take things away from you, such as a lot of you are in the environmental field. Let's say you're in conservation. I cannot access without permits like anyone else all my medicines, all of the things that I need to make baskets, whether they're from birch bark or ash, or I want to collect foods that grow in the national park. I really don't have access to those. And so it's interesting to note, and when I do training, I teach that 90% of all land is owned by white males, the largest landowner being public land, which is like 28 to 29%. So this was very frustrating to me as a person, and educating my kids. The reason I have a picture of my kids here is that even in our own tribal systems, they were being discriminated against laterally when practicing spirituality, because a lot of people have converted to Christianity. I was raised with both, and I have tolerance for both, but a lot of Christians do not have tolerance for Native American spirituality. So this feeling that I was feeling is called cognitive dissonance, of sort of a term that's coined to describe what someone feels when they're taught something that sort of is in conflict with what they know or what they think they know. So Mishi, like I said, this is a description by Kyle Mallett from Pokagon Band, who does language. And it sort of means that big grouping of trees, but it also could mean dead trees after that burn. And so there is, even when rejuvenating our language, always sort of this conversation, what does this word really mean? And I like to think I can feel words. So I asked myself these questions along my journey of becoming sort of this environmentalist. And if you're an environmentalist or you're just someone watching, I sort of want you to think about these questions yourself. Like, what land do your ancestors originate from? Why does it matter? Where do you live now? What is your culture? What foods do you eat? What have you lost from not being able to access your traditional foods? Do you suffer from cultural genocide too? What is your relationship with the environment? And lastly, how can you grow and encourage others to grow? And so some of us are already in that growth mindset or have leadership positions where we can sort of make a bigger impact. And maybe you're just getting started and you want to know how you make an impact. This is why I wanted to share my story. So this is sort of how I grew up. We always said in my family, if you haven't been to a protest, you're not Native. And in fact, my youngest son, I like to tell the story of how a mall cop sort of accosted him during a peaceful protest, and he bit him. And I know some people are like, why would you take your 4-year-old son to a protest? It's because he has a drum, and that's our grandmother drum. And I want my kids to know, and I want all of you to know, that we all have a voice, and we all of us deserve to be heard. And this is me finding my voice. And I'm going to have to sort of move some stuff around on my screen because I can't even see all of it there. That's better. So I have done a lot of work. Some of you may be familiar with my work, but I do a lot of my work with universities and conservation groups where either you have to pay to sort of get the training, or you are a part of a university and it's a part of their curriculum where I come in and I offer more diverse way of thinking. So I've taught food sovereignty, gardens, monarch butterflies, strategic planning in relationship to land acknowledgements. I'll discuss land acknowledgements later. Traditional ecological knowledge, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and sense of belonging. But I truly started out just sort of like protesting and seeing like Standing Rock. If you guys aren't familiar, Standing Rock was a huge protest where people were being arrested every day. And it really took a toll on me. And I started asking myself, what can I do to make this better? But I didn't like conflict. So I had to learn how to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. So I'm Bear Clan, and I sort of introduced myself as Bear Clan earlier. And so each clan has responsibilities, and my responsibilities as a Bear Clan person is sort of like what you think of a bear. A bear is a fierce protector. We watch the bear for what medicines they eat so that we can medicine our loved ones. And so they're teachers too. So these in general have been the rule of thumb for Potawatomi Great Lake region natives. And I just want to say that there's over 574 nations, and that's just in the United States. And we are not homogenous on all things, but I can say that for Bear Clan, for woodland natives, this pretty much stands true that our responsibilities come as being protectors. That could be security, actual police security on our reservation, and it could be medicine people. I'm still learning medicines, and I started out knowing just a little bit, and I each year develop a little bit more so that I can be a wise teacher too. And so this is how I became an accidental environmentalist and started doing some of the work like traditional ecological knowledge. I was asked by an elder to attend a monarch butterfly class in Wisconsin and then in Minnesota. And because she was my elder and I really respect her, I said yes. And I really didn't know what I was doing there because although I've always liked butterflies, I wasn't really into learning about butterflies. And I didn't know what I was going to get out of it. But what I did get out of it is sort of this sense that what I always knew inside learning science mattered, but I didn't know how to apply it. And in this sense, she was talking about milkweed. And milkweed is a soup that we eat in our Potawatomi culture. And basically, we know how to utilize the milkweed all year round. Milkweed offers that plant when it shoots up in the spring, that flower, you can eat it. We eat the tops of the leaves. We eat the pod, and you can even eat the seeds. And some might say, isn't this poisonous? I would say an apple is poisonous if you eat 1,000 seeds and crush them up too. In moderation, I don't see even poison ivy the same way as other people. There are tribes that ingest it, and it's sort of like taking a vaccine for it, if you will. You have to know when to do it and how much. And so the word poisonous sort of steers people like, oh, it's poisonous, I can't eat that. So one of the things that I like to teach when I'm teaching traditional ecological knowledge, especially food sovereignty or medicine, is that our language matters, the way we perceive matters, the way that we bridge traditional ecological knowledge matters. Because this butterfly workshop, this elder said you should tell the lady in charge that, and she was a PhD, and I'm like, oh, she's a PhD, she's not going to want to hear what I have to say. She's so smart, she's an expert, I'm not an expert. So I shared with her what I knew about milkweed and how to eat it and why her butterflies prefer one milkweed over another. And we just shared and collaborated, and it ended up giving me a newfound voice that I did have value. and I did have something to offer that was unique. And so I sort of started on this road to teaching people what food sovereignty and seed saving was. And I've been able to do this for multiple organizations, conservation groups, and even museums and universities are now wanting to know what traditional ecological knowledge means to them and why it matters. And so it sort of has been this unique place where I can grow and learn and collaborate with very intelligent people and be valued at the same time. I always like to recommend a book, and I feel like Robin Kimmerer is somebody well known, but this is someone that isn't maybe as recommended as Robin has been, but this is an exceptional book, talks about seed saving. And I know many of you are environmentalists, so I thought I'd put this up here. I'd like to see if anybody's read it, to put in the chat box what your feedback is on it. So I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of different organizations and even museums. The Smithsonian had a whole wing of just different things that I grew up with in my era of things that were sort of racist and oppressed Native people. I was literally given these cowboys and Indians to play with, and they were in every household that I went to. And, you know, you can still get them on eBay, but I sort of grew up with this sense that Indians were defeated, and I grew up with schools putting on powwows, and that sense of frustration came sort of steamrolling back on me when I live in the Chesterton area, and it wasn't my child's school, but there was a school putting on powwows, and I had to sort of go into the school, and I was mentored by a friend of mine to ask what their objectives were and how they could better meet them, because simply going in there frustrated and upset wouldn't work. I know Kim Swift is on this call, and I think it was when COVID hit, I was like, I'm not really sure what I'm going to do for work, because I'm going into all these conservation groups, and these schools are shut down, and so is, you know, the National Park and the Dunes Learning Center. And what am I going to do for work? And I was told that maybe I should do a webinar. And so I started thinking about what that webinar might be. And I was really brave, I think, because I took on a huge task of like saying, what can we teach people that's going to move the needle on diversity and a sense of sort of inclusion with Indigenous science. So I chose to sort of talk about Western science and traditional knowledge. And if you haven't heard about Western science and Indigenous knowledge being bridged, it's sort of like that butterfly story that I told you about, being able to share how we eat milkweed and sort of help her along with her thesis. Well, Indigenous knowledge makes sense because it takes more of a holistic approach, and I'll better explain. If you are a scientist, and I know we have some scientists and PhDs on this call, or even in high school, we're dissecting frogs. I got to dissect frogs, pigs, and yes, even cadavers in college. And so I was sort of thrown back by the process. You know, it's kind of gruesome, but I had known a lot of the frog parts because I grew up catching frogs. Not only did we catch frogs, we ate frogs. And so I had a really hard time dissecting frogs in high school. And I remember really having a debate with my teacher that I don't think this is right, that I have to open up a frog, and how many high schools are there? How many frogs die a year? And, you know, he sort of thought it was ludicrous that I was making this point. However, I think when you engage in an environment like I did, and whether I know Christine's on the call and she's sort of my hero because she can take apart a chicken. I think when you have a relationship with the food you eat, I don't think it is as necessary for every student to be dissecting frogs unless you're going to be a doctor or go into a field where you need to know every part. And so the why for me sort of comes from a sense of I'm looking at science from not only a Western perspective, but an Indigenous perspective. And there's some really great things written. And because I don't have time to teach this, and it's already 7:04, I can't really teach traditional ecological knowledge in 45 minutes. It's like saying we can teach biology in 45 minutes. It's sort of a lifetime approach to learning, and I'm continuing to learn. So this is a great place to start if you're not familiar. And here's just the overall sense in case you didn't quite get what I was saying. The traditional knowledge is a real science. And just like natives have always known that we have 52 moons and that's how we cycle, Indigenous people all over the world have known this, and they all have their own Indigenous science, Aboriginal people. And so they pass this down through generations, this knowledge, and it is thousands of years of observation, whereas Western science is just hundreds of years of observation if we're lucky. And one takes and separates like the frog, and one's more holistic. I like to think of it as qualitative and quantitative, but you sort of have some common things where we can bridge. But wouldn't it be great if we could look at science from both perspectives, because that's broadening our perspective. And we know when we broaden our perspective that we have better outcomes and more knowledge and better solutions. So that leads me to some of the work I did as a diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging. And I get a lot of times, what is traditional ecological knowledge? But just as much, I get the question, what's diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging? Well, this is something that all organizations are starting to do. Diversity is welcomed to the party, meaning we're being inclusive with all people, whether they're handicapped or from another culture or a different sexual orientation. We are creating safe spaces to welcome to the party. And when they get there, and I've sat on BIPOC panels or panels where they say conservation doesn't have tons of people of color or we can't keep them, that's because we need to give people resources for fair opportunity. What does that mean? For instance, when I went to Northwestern to be certified as a diversity, equity, and inclusion leader, it not only took my time, which I had to spare, it also took $2,000. And when they covered diversity, equity, inclusion, we covered a lot of different people, but we skipped out on Indigenous people altogether. And by the end of my certification, I was asking some serious questions like, where's all the Indigenous information? So I feel very strongly that the work that I'm doing in educating in science from a traditional perspective is really adhering to this diversity, equity, and inclusion, when a lot of universities just aren't even including us in the conversation. So not only do we need resources, when I did ask those questions, the answer was we've never had an Indigenous person get certified through this university in DEI. And I said, well, are you aware that you have a land acknowledgement, and land acknowledgement should also include action? And action means that you are on Potawatomi land that was taken unfairly, and lots of Native Americans do not have resources to be able to afford this class. Wouldn't it be nice if you could offer scholarships? And I just started offering some reasonable ways to be to be sensible about how to develop a diversity, equity, and inclusion program. And what we get when we have organizations that hear all people, it's sort of what we got when we did traditional ecological knowledge. I have had tons of feedback that what they've learned from the work that I'm doing is, in a sense, helping them broaden their perspectives, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And people aren't doing their work in the same way. They're being more welcoming. And when we can do that, we can see the whole puzzle, because I like to think that each one of us is unique and has value. And what I was taught in high school through public school systems, that Indigenous people don't have value. And so we all have value. It took me a long time to discover my value and what my niche was. And I want to encourage all of you, if you have that platform and you are a leader, ask yourself, how can you diversify the way your team is thinking and how you are bringing different people into your workspaces? So I mentioned land acknowledgements. The first organization I really ever worked with land acknowledgements, I was doing food sovereignty for them. And these ladies I worked with were just terrific. And we discussed what land acknowledgements are, what they should be. Lots of organizations are reading off land acknowledgements, like whose land they reside on, but without a strategic action plan or a business plan that has measurable objectives such as dates, times, and mechanisms to build relationships with Indigenous communities. For instance, Northwestern University, I was giving them their strategic action plan of ways that they could build relationships with natives and make more equitable workspaces. So that's what diversity, equity, and inclusion is all about. It's like, we need a solution, and we're either going to say, well, the way we're doing things is the right way, or we can say, let's give everyone a voice and find the best solution together. So I want to talk about mistakes and patience and just sort of persistence. I have made plenty of mistakes along the way. I'm going to continue to make them. I was brave when I started out as a young lady wanting to try out for a boys soccer team. I think that gave me a little bit of hope. And so little by little, I've sort of been my own maverick and said, I see a need for something that doesn't exist. I don't know what it looks like. How do I make this better? Right now, some of the mistakes I've made are, you guessed it, I started a nonprofit, and I'd never started a nonprofit. It will be up and running, but we really haven't been able to move forward because I'd never done a nonprofit and the mistakes I made along the way. And so as I learn, I've made mistakes, but I haven't made big ones. Mishawaka, the nonprofit that I started, will still happen. And people will hopefully, through Mishawaka, have environmental programs from Indigenous perspectives. But we all have to be patient too. Sometimes I want things to happen right away. And when they don't, I get frustrated, just like any human being. But I have to remind myself that we all have to be patient. Looking at the time, 7:12, I think I'm doing pretty good. So let's talk about mentorship, building relationships, and platforms. Sometimes you meet people just from relationship building. And I always say that you shouldn't ask Native Americans to do work for free. Sometimes in your community, it's okay to do work for free, but you can't do all your work for free. But I can say sometimes when you're relationship building, like I did with Nancy and the people with the Hammond Community Center for Earth Day, sometimes you just want to make it work, because when you meet people like you and you know that they're your family, you want to make things happen. So I've been a part of the Hammond Community Center to sort of like promote different ways of thinking. And I want to just mention Just Transition Northwest Indiana. I actually met Nancy on there, and I've met her in several other forums, but these women and men that do this work are so awesome. They have taught me so much that, you know, whenever we do this work, like I said, it's just like teaching. I'm learning just as much as I'm sharing. So it's a really rewarding thing. With Just Transition, Northwest Indiana was teaching me with legislation, but they sort of diversified and were really open to me having a water ceremony for a protest or rally during COVID when there was legislation against our wetland bills. And this is just a poster I made, but you know, protests can look different, rallies can look different. And the feedback that I got was that it was a nice sort of rally / protest because we got to share in water ceremony. And so you don't have to even know what your path looks like all the time. You can just sort of wing it. So talk about winging it. I have had a lot of fun along the way. Just this year, I have met some awesome people. Kathy Sippel's on this call. She recommended me to talk to the former First Lady, Judy O'Bannon, and I said yes. And I got to talk about spirituality and oneness and how in Potawatomi language, we don't really have a word for I. And can you imagine what our environment would look like if we had no word for I? It's sort of a beautiful thing. And Judy and I just like sort of hit it off, and she really liked the sense that we are all one, because that's not just a Potawatomi thing, that's sort of universal. It's in the Christian Bible, it's in Buddhism. And we talked about how universal unity is and coming together and how great that feels. And so that was just really rewarding. And I'm very thankful for all the mentors. And I know a lot of you are on this call, and how much I appreciate each and every one of you for giving me a platform so my voice is heard. And this is Starla Thompson. I just met her over the last year. She does very, very similar work to me in diversity, equity, inclusion. She doesn't do the traditional ecological knowledge, but I just want to say that it helps to meet people along the way that are in it to win it and suffering setbacks, and we keep pushing through, and we're making real change and moving the needle on how people think about Indigenous people. And then this is Gian. I mentioned her earlier. And again, she did some outstanding projects and continues to do outstanding projects to sort of put Potawatomi history in the forefront of Chicago. And I got to participate in that as well. And so this is just sort of a poem that I found that I really like. And I would like to take a moment of silence, because I hate reading things on the screen, and just give you just a moment to read this poem, let this sink in really quick. And sort of give me a thumbs up when you're ready. Okay, perfect. So how are you going to amplify voices, build platforms if you're in a position of power? And if you're not, how are you going to be brave and courageous and sort of donate to your community, your time and your effort with your passions? So this is sort of the same questions about amplifying your voices. I want to end, because we have to wrap things up, with some time for questions. But I just want to say, I grew up thinking that Native food was Indian tacos, yet my dad had me foraging for leeks. And I just told you we had squirrel, or I didn't tell you we had squirrel, we did. Frogs, we had all kinds of unique things growing up, and I was sort of embarrassed about it, but I sort of celebrate it now. This is a simple pawpaw ice cream, and out by me, we didn't have pawpaws, but it took a friend out here that exposed me to pawpaw hunting. And it's one of my favorite things to take people to do now. If you haven't been searching for pawpaws, they're sort of a cross between a banana and an avocado to me. They take nuts, sometimes maple syrup. I take the nuts to make my own nut milk, like almond milk, and I take the pawpaw pulp and berries, and I sort of make my own ice cream, and it's delicious, and people don't know what they're eating, and they're like, oh, that's delicious. What can I have the recipe? Well, then they have to go pawpaw hunting with me. So there's very few opportunities for me to offer things to the public for free. I'm really excited that our library is diversifying. I'm hoping we can build a better library with books that are contemporary, but this is my next thing that's open to the public, because like I said, most of the time I'm working for conservation groups and universities where it's not accessible to people. But this should be a fun one, because I'm going to leave everybody with recipes that they can make over Thanksgiving and share some of the stories that they hear from me. And that's it, folks. We're ready for some questions. If I can unshare my screen.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Billie. And Katie, if you would take a look at questions that may have collected in both comments and on the Facebook chat, that would be great.
Absolutely. We have a couple of comments. And again, anybody watching, please feel free to put your questions into the chat or comment section. So earlier you asked about the Seed Keeper book, and Connie commented that the Highland Neighbors group started a book club, and they recently read that book and had a wonderful discussion about it. So you have some fans. Let's see. Kelly asked, can you post the link to your next event in the chat by chance? Do you have a link for more information on that?
I don't have the link on me. It's in that flyer, but I can get it to Nancy and we can send it to everybody.
Great. I'm sorry, Nancy, did I interrupt you? I feel like you were gonna.
No, I think, could you just more slowly, Billie, just announce where the event is being held, the date and the time? And I think
Sure.
that's what people need, is that.
Let me just go back to it. It's Tuesday, November 15th. And they're only taking 100 signups. It sounds like a lot. And then 30 people in person. And so signups just started, I believe, on Tuesday or Wednesday. And I think they had the first day, I think 10.
Thank you very much. I think that will take care of that question.
Okay.
Thank you. Sarah asked, do you happen to know the traditional name of the St. Joe River?
I know that it's Ribbontown, and I do have maps. My uncle John Warren, actually, I'll have to search to see if I can find it on YouTube, has a whole ceremony that was sort of recorded, and he talks about the name of Ribbontown and why it got its name, and it's sort of in-depth story, but we just say Ribbontown. But St. Joseph River goes through many, many counties. So there is a word for it, but like I said, I haven't been exposed to that word enough to feel confident without finding the source of it. But I can say too, if you Google Ribbontown, you'll find Ribbontown, Potawatomi. That is my father's younger brother, John, and his younger son, John T. That it's their drum is, and their drum band is called Ribbontown. And I believe Kim Swift even had them at the national park when she was still with us in Indiana.
Thank you so much for that. Kim Swift is confirming. Terrific. Thank you, Kim. Noel had a question. As a Bear Clan representative, can you speak to the diversity of clans in the Potawatomi culture and their roles?
I can't speak for every clan. What's interesting is, so you can be Potawatomi, but you can be a Potawatomi that is not practicing or traditional. Each clan is responsible for passing on clan knowledge. So I don't have really any knowledge of other clans' responsibilities, just like general, but our responsibilities, I am lucky enough to be from a family and to have found mentors to sort of teach me. And so a lot of Bear Clan medicine, I wouldn't even be able to publicly share, but I really am getting pretty good at like what's considered sacred and not sacred. So I'm getting better at being able to share more and more as I grow and learn. And so what's interesting, gender roles are even important. I think why that's a good question is I don't have the same teachings even as my 3 sons have. So I would take what's called nensama or tobacco and gift a cousin, uncle, elder, another man to teach my sons fire teachings. And so my sons, I was having moon ceremony and my son was being my fire keeper and I blew on the fire and he's like, oh no, you can't blow on the fire. Mom, I'm shocked you don't know that. And I'm like, where did you get that teaching? I've never heard that before. And he told me who it came from. And I had given this man tobacco to teach my sons and to take them into sweat and to teach them. And so I'm still, that's why learning is interesting. I learned so much even from my kids that I don't know.
That is fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing that.
And maybe we have time for one more question, Katie.
Sure. I'll note Kathy put the link to that event into the chat. Thank you so much, Kathy. I dropped it into the comments on Facebook, so everyone should have access to that now. You are a gem. Oh, here we go. So Walt asked a question. He learned that hundreds of Potawatomi were removed from the Valparaiso lakes were the Prairie Band. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah. So what's interesting, I want to point out that there's 9 or 10 bands between Canada, the United States, and Mexico. And my great-great-grandfather actually lived amongst the Prairie Band, and we really weren't separate bands. We lived in villages of 600 or 700. And can you imagine right now, we have family, I know I have family that are living pretty far apart from me, that if a government system came in and said, oh, you're Valparaiso, Indiana people, you're South Bend, Indiana people, and separated us, that's sort of what happened with the Potawatomis. We're all one people. And because we were living in different areas and we were separated, which was a military tactic, we're one people. So I want to point that out. And we were removed from this area in this region. And I get to share a lot of that in a lot of the workshops that I do. And while I don't know if we can drop, the Dunes Learning Center has a link. I don't know if Kathy can maybe do it for us, but I have to just say it was my very first webinar, but it does have some really good information. And I am going to talk about a little bit of the history in this region, but while I would love to get together, because I know you probably have information that I don't know, because I learned about like the Weesaw name in Valparaiso. I didn't even know we had a Weesaw road name. I know we had some plats in Hobart, so I would love to get together, and I always like collaborating with people.
Okay, thank you so very much. So, Billie, heartfelt thanks for coming and spending this, I'm going to say valuable and sacred time, actually, because my eyes have certainly been opened and my heart is more receptive now. So, thank you so very much. We're going to transition to announcements, and I want to keep these really short and brief because I want to acknowledge we're 1 minute from the time that we usually stop green drinks. So personally, if you feel the need that you need to go and get on to something else, that's perfectly fine. Katie, I know that you have some things from Save the Dunes, so maybe we could kick off with those first.
Absolutely. And before I do, Billie, if you're comfortable with putting, oh, Kathy took care of it, your email in the chat. Kathy, you were on top of it tonight. Okay. So Save the Dunes has our 5K this Saturday. And registration is still open. So I will drop that link into the chat. We would love to have you. And we have a couple more events happening later this month. So I would encourage you to sign up for our e-newsletter. If you haven't already, you can head to our website, which is savedunes.org, and make sure you're signed up. We have a brand new website as well. So if you want to go and explore and see everything that's on there.
Right. My big theme for this whole month and beyond has been to vote green. So I want to point out an excellent resource. It's called Voters for a Green Indiana. And you can go on to Google search and just put that in. And the site's going to come up. It's nonpartisan, and it's a green voters guide for the 2022 election. And all of the candidates that are running have been thoroughly investigated, from prior votes to what their statements have been in their campaign materials and everything else. And then another resource that hasn't gotten as much of a hearing is the Sierra Club Hoosier chapter. And they've put out a guide that's called Conservation and Sustainable Energy Scorecard. What I really love about this resource is they take every single bill that has been presented and they tell you how that person voted on that. So this does apply only to elected officials, but you would be surprised if you look up some of the people that are representing our area. And so this is a great way to decide how you're going to vote also. So does anybody else have any announcements that they would like to make before we adjourn this evening? Okay, then I'm going to call this a wrap, and it's a very successful and fulfilling green drinks. And I have to say there's a feeling about this one that's very different from all of the others that we've hosted. So Billie, again, you know, from the bottom of my heart, just gratitude and thankfulness. And hopefully I'll see you, you know, for your Thanksgiving event at the library. It's great seeing everybody.